What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, giving you your weekly look at what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan, joined by my trusty co-host, Dave Martin Swagger. Dave, what's going on, man?
Hey, man, how's it going? 3.5 hours of The Irishman. You stoked?
Yeah, no, I'm not. We're going to talk about that in a second and get a little bit further into it. Before we do, though, hit that subscribe button if you're listening on YouTube. Go to soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod to find all the ways to listen to the podcast, and go to our YouTube page. Or did I say that right? Go to our iTunes page.
Go twice. Go back to YouTube.
Yeah, subscribe and then unsubscribe and subscribe again. Yeah, so news came out last week that The Irishman, Martin Scorsese's newest film, it's going to be a Netflix property, dropped on Netflix, a couple weeks after its limited release in theaters, will be 3.5 hours long. How are you feeling about 3.5 hours of Irishman?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because we've been thinking about The Irishman for a long time. I think for good reason. It's the 25th Scorsese movie. Martin Scorsese, 76 now. There's only a few films left in him, you assume. And this also, of course, is the union of Robert De Niro and Scorsese. They haven't had a movie together since Casino, 95. This is Al Pacino's first movie with Scorsese, period. And of course, Joe Pesci, this is only his third role since 1999. He was basically retired forever. And of course, him and De Niro linking up after such a long time as well. So a lot of exciting talent all around. Oh, of course, and it's written by Steve Zalian, who we last talked about when he wrote The Night Of for HBO, but, accomplished film writer and author and all that. So just really exciting pedigree, of course, with this movie. And we talked about it in our Oscars lead-up pod a few months ago. And it's premiering at New York Film Festival on the 27th of September. And that's how we knew about this length. And then, as you alluded to, limited theatrical run on November 1st. Then it'll be on Netflix everywhere on November 27th. But it's 3.5 hours long.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because part of me wonders if Scorsese shot a lot for this movie, and because they did so much effects work. I mean, the reason this is a Netflix movie is because Paramount dropped it because the budget was ballooning so much with the digital de-aging of the old men that are starring in this movie. And it was the Jimmy Hoffa story, so they're all being de-aged quite a bit. So that's really where the cost went. You wonder if Scorsese, we should put all this hard work into shooting this movie and then spend tons of money on de-aging all these guys. Should we just keep it all in? Or is it maybe because Netflix couldn't get it into theaters because they wouldn't grant a larger exclusivity window? The theater chains were like, "Nah, fuck you. A month is not enough for us to carry this movie," which is unfortunate and a different convo and disappointing, but maybe that's why. Who knows? But 3.5 hours, reportedly, at least that's the festival length. It could change. Some say it's too long. Some don't care. I'm waiting and seeing right now.
Okay.
Because it's Scorsese, because I'm been excited for this movie. I don't want to have my critical eye, colored. I don't want to get in the dirt until we see the movie. And yes, maybe it's very indulgent and not deserving of the length. It's fucking dumb long. But let's find that out first before we spread negativity. That's my take on it.
My take is too long. 3.5 hours is just too much. In the age where everything is so compressed, we have on this podcast talked about albums that we appreciate for being short and concise.
Sure. 30 minutes.
Yes, we talked about The Righteous Gemstones as a comedy and our concerns of an hour-long comedy. If they're not hitting, that can start to feel pretty long.
Thankfully, that was just the premiere, not the normal episodes.
We've talked about movies on here that have an hour 40-minute runtime, and we're like, you get in, you get out, you enjoy it, perfect. And then I'm sitting here and I'm like, God damn it, if it wasn't Martin Scorsese, how many other filmmakers would I be like, okay, I actually will sit through this thing, which I'm going to. But probably going to take a couple pee breaks, probably get up, walk around. I mean, the other thing is, Scorsese takes on these huge epic stories, and that's what usually makes a lot of them pretty long. But his other movies run kind of long in points too. I mean, Casino, great movie. I think definitely 3 hours. There's some parts that could have been cut down just a little bit. The Departed, there's definitely parts in that where you're just like, can we cut the fat here a little bit? And I appreciate Scorsese wanting to show us a lot. But man, 3.5 hours just feels so daunting. We were talking a little bit before this yesterday, and you made some good points that the Return of the King, the director's cut, is this length. The director's cut.
No. The theatrical version is this length. The director's cut's fucking over 4 hours. The extended edition, I should say.
And the reason I'm in for that is it's the end of a trilogy that earned that respect. It's also it received the most nominations for a movie before.
Yeah, at that time, it was the most nominated movie ever. I think it also had the most wins at the Oscars. Won Best Picture, obviously.
I mean, just a masterpiece. The de-aging so far in the trailers, I'm not totally sold on, but I have confidence that Martin Scorsese will not let that get in the way of this movie being successful. So, do I think The Irishman will be good? Yes. Do I think my take will still be it's too long? I do. That's my expectation. But we'll have plenty of time to talk about the Irishman. Like you said, it's coming out in November, so we got a couple more months. Something that just came out, Dave Chappelle's Sticks and Stones, newest stand-up comedy special on Netflix. I think this is his 5th one.
Yeah, 5th with Netflix. We know at least the first 3 he got $20 million a pop for, and those first 4 he put those all out in like a year's span or so. Really got to it after the long, tough hiatus he was on during the Obama years.
This is a very interesting stand-up special for me. Love Dave Chappelle. I found his other specials pretty interesting. This felt way more inflammatory and in your face than the other ones, to me at least. And I was kind of left feeling like almost like Dave Chappelle went more for shock value than he did for humor on this. And I'm not quite sure what to make of that quite yet. How are you feeling just generally about the special?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the whole genesis of Chappelle's point, his worldview in this special, and it's not this is coming out of the blue. He references past things he said on these recent Netflix specials, but it really kind of crystallizes here where Dave Chappelle just clearly does not like the landscape comedy is in 2019. He's certainly not alone with that in terms of being called out for things you say in the comedy sphere that are not PC, right? And he basically is going right at cancel culture, as it were. And a lot of people are coming to his defense that have watched the special and being like, if you don't want to hear these kind of jokes, don't watch the special, which is fine. I think that is right. But we're also forgetting that you should only be saying these fucked up jokes if they're good jokes, if they're funny, right? Like Anthony Jeselnik. He knows his brand. He's really good at this. No one gives him shit because he tells really funny, elaborate jokes that happen to be super fucked up and he goes after everyone, right? But it works. And his last special was very well received for that earlier this year. But if you're not saying funny things and you're just pissing people off, you can't just say, oh, well, it's comedy, because if it's bad comedy, then like you're saying, it's just kind of being a shock jock for what's the purpose, right? And I think right. Deezus and Mero have talked about this where you gotta pick your spots with this. And I think the key is that you have to be funny. And he's funny in this special, but he's not always funny. And when you're walking that fine line, it's just going to be hit or miss with people. And I think Dave just doesn't like hearing that.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty sound analysis of it. There were some bits that hit, like you said. I thought him, especially talking about R. Kelly, and coming right after the Michael Jackson stuff, which I found very tough to listen to. I didn't. The big joke for that was, well, you gotta teach these 12-year-olds there's no free trip to Hawaii, and it's like, oh wow, that's dark.
And Macaulay Culkin
Right.
On still pure, apparently. Like,
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
Tough stuff there.
But then I did feel like he bounced back with R. Kelly stuff, and especially talking about the lady who wanted him to be in the documentary and using him as like, it's too salacious. Dave Chappelle didn't even want to be in. He's like, I didn't even know who she was. Like, I felt like that was decent, but it was very up and down. The alphabet people I found to be insightful in some respects, because he shows some knowledge of the inter LGBTQ community politics and foods, but
about the car specifically.
Right. But I found reducing them to the alphabet people to be quite reductionist, and I think really the thing that comes through on this is Dave really seems to not necessarily show an understanding of power dynamics at all times throughout this. I think I think specifically talking about transgender people, he seems to really not understand the experiences and the difficulties that they go through. Especially when he started doing the face, like if I was an Asian person, if I felt like I was an Asian person in my body, I felt like that was just like, I really literally almost turned it off at that point. So
he also had a classic, he said this more than once, I have gay friends, or I have friends with all the letters, and it's like, we've heard that used to horrific effect when it's, well, I have black friends, let me say something racist now,
Right.
And again, like, it's all presented in the sphere of comedy, and it's not that Dave is doing anything that different from what he used to do, but the fastball is just not what it was. And if the jokes are sloppy, especially in today's climate, you're just going to catch some flack for it. And like I said, if the jokes are tighter, it's not a big deal. But that's just something he has to reckon with. And, you kind of wish that his observational humor would be not so focused on how people react to him. Because again, he's not making jokes for these people. So why are you basing your whole routine on the expected reaction for these people, right?
Yeah,
it's just kind of weird. I did like his Jussie Smollett jokes though. Jussie Smollett. I thought that was a really funny introduction to that whole thing, and then having the cops ask where Kanye was at the time. That was a good callback. And abortion, you kind of like on the edge of your seat when he's talking about like, what's he going to say here? And he apparently comes out in support of the right to choose if he's not a pro-abortion personally guy. And then he immediately goes into men have the right to be deadbeat dads as well. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, did you feel like you got a lot of like the black perspective that you expect from Dave Chappelle? I didn't so much. I mean, apart from shooting up schools as a white man's game, it didn't feel like he brought a whole lot of like what's unique to Dave in this one. It just felt really scattershot.
Yeah, I don't feel like we got much perspective from Dave beyond he like you said, he obviously doesn't feel very content with where comedy's at or PC culture is at, and I think for someone who's so thoughtful, you think about what the Chappelle Show was and why it succeeded. It was the type of humor where it was like shocking at first, but then you were like, wow, that was actually a really good point, or that is something that it embodies an issue that's going on, or something that people from different cultures do. And it was so smart and so well thought out. And this just feels a bit like that old person who doesn't really want to move forward and just kind of wants things to stay the same. But comedy isn't where it was at when he stepped away. And I think that's something he's still trying to reckon with at this point. Just one last thing I wanted to ask you about. How did you feel about the Louis C.K. stuff?
That was, I mean, he talks about that. He talks about Kevin Hart, two guys he's friends with. And yeah, it's kind of, I mean, he's just kind of dismissing everything they did. And, and he's not the first one to say like Louis C.K. what he do wasn't so bad about all that, but he just doesn't care about the other perspective of it. He just has his thoughts on the matter, and that's all that he's going to present or reckon with. So some people will find it funny, some won't, but he's just not like deeply thinking about it. He's like, that was my friend, and I'm a victim blamer. Here's why, all that. That's just he doesn't. There's really no insight.
Yeah, I agree. And going back to the idea of like, or the observation that he maybe doesn't understand the power perspectives at play. Sure, the way Dave presents it, it's like, oh, yeah, Louis C.K., maybe what he did wasn't as bad as some of the other sexual offenses that have come to light, but it still doesn't make it okay, and it still doesn't make it consensual, and like you said, that other perspective is really lacking, which I think is in contrast to another comedy special we just talked about in terms of Aziz Ansari, who I think tried to be very thoughtful in terms of how he presented his perspective. Maybe not always done perfectly, but he seemed to put a little bit more thought into it than Dave Chappelle did. So I don't know, a bit disappointing for sure. Still gonna watch his next special because I think he's earned the right to have some clunkers, but I really do hope that he finds more of a voice and perspective that's in 2019 or 2020, whenever the next one comes out. So why don't we move on though to some more, I guess, like showbiz news. Annapurna Pictures, a production and distribution company known for producing such movies as Vice, which we reviewed last year. Check that out. The Master, Zero Dark 30, Spring Breakers, Her, some pretty big, very artistic movies. Recently had a bailout. Dave, give me the deets of that.
Yeah, so Annapurna came about in 2011, founded by Megan Ellison, who's notable for being the daughter of Larry Ellison, the billionaire CEO of Oracle. And Megan Ellison sought out to have Annapurna be a place for auteur-driven films, and she, as you said, she made a lot of good movies, or financed a lot of good movies, distributed a lot of good films. Also recently, Phantom Thread and Beale Street last year.
Yeah,
and the thing is, Annapurna has kind of been held up, alongside like A24 and more recently like Neon as these smaller distributors, not among the big ones, not your Paramounts, your Lionsgates, your Universals, your Disneys, your Foxes, right? Your Sonys, the smaller ones. They only put out a few movies a year. They're not financing blockbusters, but you generally look at them as a mark for quality because they're picking good movies from good people with good talent. And the problem with Annapurna has been that it's been known for a while that they just have not been doing well financially because a lot of their movies have just been losing money, and a lot of insider chatter about the choices Megan had made with the film she chose to finance and push through. And then it obviously came to a head where they were exploring bankruptcy. That came out like a month ago or so. And then the most recent development we know is that the company is basically saved because Larry Ellison came in to basically negotiate the debt down, $200 million in debt with the various lenders and stuff. And we don't need to get into the finance of the details of the banks or anything, but it is interesting because you feel like Annapurna will now change, and the talk is that they're not going to operate on credit anymore. They'll finance films on a case-by-case basis, or even Megan will just finance the movies herself. But I think they're going to change in their decisions, which probably is not great for the hardcore film fan like you or me, because they're just going to be more, Annapurna's going to be more risk-averse now because they financially need to be. And movies like The Sisters Brothers that came out last year with Joaquin Phoenix and John C. Reilly, this critically adored Western period film that just did not find an audience at all and lost tens of millions of dollars. Everyone else thought that was a bad bet, but Megan financed it anyway. Is that movie going to get financed now? And if it doesn't, it just doesn't get made anymore. So I think it's a bit of a death nail for the mid-tier, the mid-budget movie that just doesn't succeed at the box office anymore, because now it looks like we're not going to see them made as much, which does suck.
Yeah, it's a bit um it's a bit sad, but I think it's also a testament to this box office this summer and just in general being not as strong. The summer's been especially tough in terms of like good movies, and it's been buoyed by some major films this year. But overall, I keep going back to the conversation I think we had a year ago about this similar topic of what's going to happen to those mid-tier movies, and like you just alluded to, they're probably going to go away or just become very rare. Well, what does that do for movie making? Does it make it just these mega box office hits, or the tiny art films that are $1 million budget, barely that? It feels like there's a whole there's going to be this huge chasm that has to be filled by something. And now Annapurna in particular has been tour driven, and I think Megan Ellison has been making smart choices in terms of directors she's been working with. Even the ones you listed off there, the movies there, it's I think 3 of the 4 you mentioned were Oscar nominated, and just really impressive. But I feel like something has to move in and take advantage of that. Now, A24 obviously is a very building respect. It's a newer production company that's been making a lot of noise in the last couple of years with some of its choices. I feel like something has to kind of come in and fill that gap so that these mid-tier movies can continue. I don't just foresee them going away, but I also don't know what is going to fill that.
Yeah, and actually, it's kind of concerning. It's kind of, I guess, happening in tandem with this now is Fox Searchlight is now under the purview of Disney. Mm. And from what we know, Disney is kind of pared down the forthcoming Fox productions that are in various stages of development, only going to complete the stuff that's most likely to succeed, and some stuff will go to Disney Plus, some stuff just straight up canned or just shelved, right? Mm-hmm. And the future of Fox Searchlight, movies that the good ones basically break even, but it's a brand that has consistently been at the top of the Oscars and just in terms of leading with nominations, and there's a stamp of quality there. But will Disney sacrifice its bottom line by contributing resources to a sub-brand that won't actually be profitable? Because if Fox Searchlight also goes away and Annapurna has to be more conservative, then we're really even in a tougher spot, because A24 is fine. They have their deal with Apple to buoying them, but A24 also goes for movies that cost nothing, and they do platform releases, and they generally they spend low on marketing. It's usually very internet driven. So A24 is already being conservative in how they approach all this. So I think we know Annapurna will survive for now. I think Megan won't be able to finance everything on her own. She will need to just pick stuff that can at least break even, right? Or just pick stuff that just overall costs less. But yeah, I mean, movies that cost $40 million, $50 million, it's just harder and harder to see a path to success, especially in this box office climate. So the ink is not dry. This phenomenon, but Annapurna, they gave away the rights to Hustlers, that Jennifer Lopez movie with Cardi B and Constance Wu coming out in a week or two. Yeah. And they even gave up Bombshell, the Roger Ailes story movie with that stacked cast already. And that feels like something they should have stuck with. But I guess after Vice, they're like, now we should maybe wait, which is weird because like Vice is considered a financial failure for Annapurna, even though it was talked about a lot and still nominated for a lot of Oscars, including Best Picture. So tough stuff overall, but we'll see what happens.
It feels like there's an opportunity for something like Amazon. And I think I mentioned this when we talked about last time, to like really fill that void. We talked about how they're kind of in no man's land, it seems like, with their streaming service. And obviously they have the Lord of the Rings property coming, and that might push them one way or the other on that. But they've had their hand in a lot of auteur-driven movies in the last couple of years. It feels like maybe they could move into that space and have the capital to keep these sort of movies afloat.
That's the thing. Amazon definitely has the wherewithal to do this, but it feels like they're not going to, because late night, which they bought for like $50 million at Sundance, has totally flopped. And a lot of their movies have not made much money. We've talked about tons of Amazon release, Amazon Studio films. A lot of them are good, but they haven't really had any box office hits apart from The Big Sick and then Manchester by the Sea. It's been a while since they had anything else. So from what we hear, it sounds like the theatrical wide release or semi-wide release that they've been pursuing might be done from Amazon, which kind of sucks. It's like they could lose some money on this property, but Amazon's not an altruistic company, so I don't know if we can look at them just yet. Maybe an Apple is just making TV at the moment, so.
But
you hope Disney emboldens Fox Searchlight and hopes to dominate the Oscars as well. That's where my hope lies.
With Amazon, though, it's like, sure, they're going to take a hit on it in the short term, but as the streaming wars are ramping up, you're going to want to have more and more on your streaming service that is going to be unique. So maybe they see the opportunity to say, okay, these movies in the short term aren't going to make us money, but in the long term will drive people to that platform. I mean, the hard part for Amazon for that, though, is the platform comes with a subscription to the Amazon shipping service, which it's just a feature of the subscription. It's not the main reason people are buying the subscription to begin with. Correct. So that's where that might fall flat. Amazon, hit me up. I want to talk to you about this. We need to save these middle tier movies. Go see and support middle tier movies in theaters, folks. A movie that might not get as much support as was originally believed. Mulan 2020. The live action, the film that Disney is remaking, has come under fire recently. There's a lot of civil unrest over in Hong Kong and China right now. It's been difficult to see how these issues around some of the legislation in China around like the draft over there and how it's allowed criminal suspects in Hong Kong to be extradited to mainland China and things like that for having to serve. It's been difficult to see how the government and police force over there has been handling that, and it's caused a lot of discord, a lot of conflict. And one of the conflicts that's come out of it has been around Liu Yifei, the lead actress playing Mulan, coming out in support of the government over there, and it's led to a boycott Mulan movement on social media. Dave, are you going to boycott Mulan? Where are you falling in this?
Yeah. Very interesting, frankly unexpected thing, because obviously it's coming from the Hong Kong folks who are protesting, but support of the Chinese government and the authoritarian state that it is not uncommon from famous Chinese people. Jackie Chan has done this multiple times, and the boycott Mulan thing. I think the goal was to have this permeate over here in the West, right? Because Hong Kong specifically is a box office, right? Not all of China, but just Hong Kong itself. I mean, I think Beauty and the Beast, which is the remake, which is like the 16th highest grossing film of all time, that made under $10 million in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is such a small piece of the pie that Disney would never, and they haven't commented at all on this, they would never give any credence to this. Just because it's not in their business interest, right? But it's been weaponized the other way. Support Mulan. That's what the mainland China pro-Chinese government people are saying. And it's kind of weird that Disney, a company that doesn't want to be political at all, now it's in their best interest to appease the authoritarian Chinese government directly. Mm-hmm. They already take advantage of their movie-going public, right? But now it's like to go to Mulan apparently is a pro-communist, a pro-police state act now. If you're in China,
tough look. Yeah, Disney reminds me a lot of Taylor Swift in terms of almost too big to fail, and tries to remain as neutral as possible to not ruffle feathers and just have the biggest fan base it can. Yeah, it's interesting because I guess as I think about this, it's I certainly don't agree with some of what I know of the legislation being proposed over there, and it seems like the Chinese government's like you said, authoritarian perspective and way of handling their business has been exploiting these stars, because perhaps they do actually agree, but I feel like it's more like they're pressured into saying these things in fear of retribution. And I think Disney, in terms of how they can, I feel like they're in a very difficult situation in terms of how they can respond. Most likely they're going to try to ignore this and hope it goes away. But if it gets closer to that time and tensions are still high, it feels like they're going to have to say something. And I wonder at that time how they would speak out, or if they would try to take some perspective to try to find some middle ground in this. Because I can't see them speaking out against it.
Well, in the movie Mulan remake, which is already done being filmed and all that, doesn't come out till March 27th next year. Will the Hong Kong protests still be this active and in the news that far in advance? Probably not. No one expects the Hong Kong conflict with the rest of China to subside by then. Then the active protests and the occupying a place like the airport. So I doubt that's still directly happening day to day come March, right? So
never know.
I mean, yeah, it's possible, but I just wonder if the movement is as pronounced at that time. I'm sure it probably will certainly come back up again, but the goal would be to get the Western audiences and other audiences to ignore it. But there's just not going to be enough exposure to why this is a problem for some people, and people are just going to show up. And I mean, let's be real for a second. The Lion King remake, despite critical derision, is about to be the 6th highest grossing movie of all time. And like I said, Beauty and the Beast is top 20. Jungle Book was almost $1 billion. Mulan probably won't make Lion King money, but it's going to be a huge hit. And it's really hard to put a dent in that. So I would be surprised if Disney says anything at all. But it is notable that back at D23, when they showed footage, their star, their Mulan, was not present.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not like they're not aware, but
I wonder if tensions still are high, if they would consider pushing it back at all. Now, I know that might affect their timeline in terms of how they're rolling these out, but it's also the sort of thing where they rolled out 3 live action Disneys at that point. You also have the new Lady and the Tramp hitting the streaming service, Disney Plus at that point. It feels like if they needed to, they could just push this off until frustrations around it subsided. But it's not the sort of thing that I think will go away. Whenever the movie drops, it's going to pop back up. Right. I don't think there's a way they can avoid it. So it'll be interesting to see how they deal with it. But Disney, just in general, man, how much more do you think they need to possess to officially become a monopoly in this culture? It's just crazy.
Well, that's the thing. It's like they already dominate the box office to such an extreme, and I expect their market share to go down next year. They just don't have as an impressive a slate come next year. No Star Wars movie, no Lion King remake, only 2 Marvel movies this time. It's not 2019 for them next year, but
right.
Warner Brothers, a lot of their big stuff either flopped or was only a modest success this year. That's now we want to see. If anything, you want WB to be like the other pillar. But we just saw CBS and Viacom merge, and we just talked about how Amazon might be powering down their film acquisitions, and it's hard to see Disney not maintain this dominance for who knows how long, man. I mean, we already know their calendar from 2021 on. It's Star Wars or Avatar every other year for 6 years. So and that's the holiday sector. We know the MCU will take care of the rest of the year. So it's pretty. I guess it's bleak. It's bleak if you're into other stuff.
Yeah, and I think that ties in nicely the mid-tier movies like we just talked about. It's, if you have one company that makes such high profits off its movies, it's not going to want to invest in the movies that will only make a small profit.
Right.
And others follow suit. So something else that I wonder if Mulan will be pushed back, but The Hunt is certainly being pushed back and shelved for foreseeable future, as after the El Paso and Dayton shootings earlier in August, they decided that they're not going to be releasing this movie starring Betty Gilpin, Glow fame, and Hilary Swank from $1 Million Baby fame, and lots of other things. Also, I didn't know that. Yeah, and this is written by Damon Lindelof, which I didn't know.
Co-writer, yeah. Emma Roberts also in it.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Well, when I first heard this, I thought, man, that makes sense. But as I've sat with this for the last couple of weeks, I kind of been going back and forth with, is this a good precedent to set for artistic properties and movies in general, that real world events can so heavily impact what people decide to put out? And I'm wondering where you're falling in terms of how are you feeling about this news in general, but then more the idea of like, should these real world events be influencing what movies and what kind of stories are being told?
Right. And it's important to note that initially Universal pulled a lot of the advertisements and marketing for The Hunt. But then once Trump tweeted, he didn't name the movie, but he blamed the film and Hollywood overall for the cause of gun violence in the country. The next day, The Hunt was completely pulled off the calendar. And they haven't said it's shelved permanently, but as of right now, we don't know if we'll ever see it. It'll see the light of day. And this is not the first time that like ads have been pulled or stuff, but it just kind of came at a bad time where, remember, blaming video games for gun violence was back in the news, right? And then blaming Hollywood. And these are two things that are not old ideas, but are constantly picked apart and shut down by anyone with a brain. And then to immediately kind of bow down to the whims of Trump, and whether he believes that or not doesn't matter, but that's the message you're sending, right?
Right.
And it kind of harkens back to, remember The Interview, Seth Rogen and Franco?
Yep.
Movie about North Korea going to kill Kim Jong-un. And that movie was pulled from theater distribution completely due to like bomb threats, vague terror threats. And whether there was any credence to that, I can understand the theater chains deciding to not risk it. Right. That's fine. And we still got a VOD release, and it frankly marketed the movie pretty well, quite well in the end. But for The Hunt, it's not like nothing else violent came out recently. We just got Angel Has Fallen, right? A movie that deals with stereotypical Middle Eastern villains and brazen gun violence from Gerard Butler, right? And it's not like we haven't had violence against civilians that might be politically motivated. This movie's co-produced by Blumhouse and Jason Blum. How many Purge movies have we seen so far?
Right.
I don't seem to care about those, right? So, as you were saying, I think the precedent for this is just really stupid. And, the movie does sound a bit inflammatory. Apparently, it might have at one point been called Red State versus Blue State. The whole concept, of course, is that these elitist, globalist folks are rounding up deplorables to go hunt and kill them, right? Basically a remake of The Most Dangerous Game from the 20th century, but with a clear contemporary U.S. spin on it. But why don't you let the audience determine if the satire works or not, Let them decide if the movie is worth all the hubbub. But to just completely not put the movie out at all because you're worried about the backlash. It's just a weak move from Universal, in my opinion.
Yeah, I felt like, it's easy to be reactionary around these sort of issues. You talk about how influential things can be, and certainly, like you said, video games are not to blame for gun violence. Mental health is not to blame for gun violence. There's a lot more that goes into it than just someone watching something and deciding, oh, that sounds like a good idea, I want to go do that. Certainly, people can see things sometimes, and it can make them think, oh, I want to look further into this, or I want to maybe learn more about this, but it doesn't actually mean that they're going to go do it. Where I feel really, I think, frustrated about this situation is, like you said, this was a movie that was probably going to be inflammatory because it was written to look at both perspectives on the issue, and it was probably going to leave a lot of people feeling one way or the other, like their perspective either wasn't represented correctly, or potentially what they didn't like seeing the other perspective represented the way it was going to be, because people, I think, oftentimes are living in this bubble where they don't want to challenge their perspectives, but more want, that a confirmation bias. But without giving the audience or anybody a chance to do that, we're just left here with this possibility and having this argument over something we don't know about.
Right.
Now,
no one's seen it at all.
I think potentially the ads could have been altered or just done differently, because even watching the trailers for it, it looks like a violent trailer. It looks like a violent movie. The ads were this like warning coming on, like there's an emergency service thing. So it kind of puts you in this sense of like insecurity or vulnerability or fear. And that potentially could have been changed to try to reduce that immediate impact. And the release had been pushed back to October already. So kind of like the Mulan thing, I think there's an opportunity to the gun debate has been raging for years and years now in America, but let the immediacy of the tragedies in El Paso and Dayton die down, and then to release this with a different spin in the trailer, so to speak.
Right. It's important to note, too, that a piece was written in the National Review that described the whole concept of the movie as something that's pro-Trump and anti-progressive. So I think really for anyone to declaratively say what the message of the movie is, whose side it's supporting, if it's satire at all, like we said, no one's seen it. So we'll put the movie out and determine that on our own. And if you want to wait a little bit, maybe not directly advertise it until there's some distance with the shootings, that's one thing. But I really hope we do see it at some point, even if it's just a VOD release.
I hope so too. Something we probably will get, though, and that has been leaking recently, unlike The Hunt, is Yandhi, Kanye's loose tracks that are reportedly on the Yandhi album, unconfirmed by Kanye or his team, but that's been the buzz around it. The interesting thing I find about these leaks is, Kanye's been kind of doing this for a long time now. Probably the most well-known of these is the Good Music, the Good Friday gimmick, where he was dropping songs every Friday, but there were other songs coming out on different days. And
right.
A lot of the songs that were on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy had been dropped in different forms, that not the final album forms. But this is something that happens around Kanye and Drake and people like that, rappers like that, and artists like that. But I had no idea that these tracks had even dropped, and I think that speaks to two things. One, Kanye ain't what he used to be, but also, I should amend that. Kanye is not the megastar he used to be, because I think if this was Kanye 2011, we're all over these when they dropped. Maybe not 2011, maybe 2009 or something like that. If this was, but the other thing is, I'm not tuned into these drops because I listen to my music all in the same way, or two ways. I either listen to it on my record player, which is all old albums at this point, or right. I listen to it on streaming. And these leaks aren't on streaming.
Right. Yeah. So what we know about this leak is 5 tracks leaked on July 19th. Quite a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
A few others came out in snippets at the end of 2018. I think a verse or two might have been performed on SNL. I Love It was an official release with Little Pump, of course. So it's been spread out. And yeah, I mean, you nailed it right away. Music listening today is as easy as it's ever been. And thus, the wide audience is just trained. It's just muscle memory now to not look very hard. Just have the music you want presented right to you, right? Most music today is listened via playlist. People tell you what's good, and you listen to the playlist that you like, right?
Mm-hmm.
New Music Friday, you go, you pick your stuff, you listen to it, right? It's very simple. Some people might do a little risky. They might go on YouTube where they have to search for it themselves, but you still get a recommended front page, right? If you log in. I think that's the only way you would have known about these leaks, because the thing with leaks, for the most part, is they can exist on YouTube and SoundCloud unless the label's directly going to purge after them. But all these Yandhi leaks are out there on YouTube. You can go search for these and listen to them and rip them off and download them if you want. Granted that they're leaks, there are a lot of the songs are demo quality. The mix is certainly not final, right? But that's what I guess is what you expect. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned like everyone would have been on this if it was 2011 or 2009, because to listen to music, I was on my computer all the time, right? And like leaks was just a way bigger thing back then. HasItLeaked.com, a website literally dedicated to telling you if something actually had leaked yet, because back then everything did leak. It was just a question of when right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I may or may not have been accustomed to listening to music a week in advance, because that's when it would first be available on the internet. And that's just not something that comes up anymore, because you just don't need to be that hardcore about it.
Yep.
And I don't say elite culture hasn't gone away. It's just different, but it's about Playboy Cardi now. It's not about Kanye, because Kanye is not as doesn't have the stands the way someone like Cardi or Uzi does. Now leaks are about like Instagram story snippets, you know?
Yep.
And it is notable though, like when I went to the Beast Coast show at the end of August, Powers Pleasant during his DJ set played Kid Cudi, aka Pissy Pamper, a unreleased Playboy Cardi song that topped the Spotify Viral 50 chart via an illegal upload, because it's an unreleased song. Someone just uploaded it and actually went viral. And that's the song, of course, you've probably heard it. It's the song in the Brooklyn Nets bench mob meme where they're all dancing on the sideline. It's that Cardi song. So like leaks are still a thing, but I don't think people actively pursue and seek them out unless they're a hardcore stan like those Cardi stans are these days. So in the Kanye instance, it does kind of speak to the lack of widespread musical clout he has right now, I guess, coming off the generally perceived to be underwhelming Ye last year. So very interesting. And Pusha T last week said that he hates this leaks and he ruins stuff. And his new single Sociopath with Cash Doll actually had leaked back in April. I don't even remember that happening because they actually went out and scrubbed it. But it is interesting that for what it says about Kanye, I suppose.
And Cash Doll is on our Nowstalgia Best of 2019 playlist on Spotify, so check that out. Yeah, it's interesting to think about how far and how much music has changed just in the last 4 or 5 years. And I don't know, I've been thinking a lot about Jai Paul, right? Yeah. And his album Leak 0413, and I wonder if that's going to become more and more common, that there's going to be these unfinished or partially finished albums that just drop because people pick up on a song or two and they're just like, I'm just going to throw this out there on streaming and see if it picks up. And if it does, people are like, let's just throw that out there, see what it is, and we can tinker with it. You think about Kanye with Life of Pablo, the I'm a Fix Wolves tweet, and how that was a living album, so to speak, right. A piece of art where he was constantly changing it on title and until he got it right where he wanted it. And
it happened with the Young Thug album 2 weeks ago as well. Throughout the weekend, it was being updated, and they actually added a Machine Gun Kelly feature to one of the songs mid-weekend. So that certainly still continues.
So I could see that becoming more the norm, where it's, not quite finished, but, putting something out, seeing if it picks up, and then just kind of dropping things and tinkering as you go. But I feel like that's also not necessarily the way I want music to be. I prefer people to, or artists to, work on these finished products. And I think that kind of brings me around to, how are you feeling about these tracks that did leak? Did you give them a listen at all?
Yeah, I listened to them. Like I said, they're all over YouTube, so you don't have to feel bad about listening to them. It's pretty easy. Yeah, I think some of them were solid. Again, it's a lot of concepts. Like, where's Kanye at right now? And like, a lot of these verses aren't finished either. There's like placeholder bars or sentences, right? And I think it was Alien. Was it? I mean, some of the names are different depending on where you're looking, because again, we don't know the official names of anything. But I think Alien, like, some of the production sounded pretty cool. But it is also more of the Kanye we've come to know recently, where he's very riding the current wave, which he's done all the time. But in this case, it's the SoundCloud wave, so it's very self-referential, lowbrow punchlines, I'd say. But there's an XXX feature on here. Once again, Kanye riding someone that's hot. He's done that the past 4 albums, right? Tiana Taylor sounded pretty cool on The Storm.
Yeah.
I Love It. Again, it's an official song, though. Did you like the one with Lauryn Hill? Like, any of these stand out to you?
Yeah, the Storm I thought was pretty good, although the one I listened to with The Storm was the one with X and Ty Dolla $ign, so maybe that one I listened to is not titled correctly.
No, that's The Storm. Yeah, I got it wrong.
Oh, that is okay. And then I really liked Alien and New Body. And New Body, especially Ty Dolla $ign, I think sounds great on that. Nicki's got a pretty finished verse. Yep. Kanye obviously needs to be tinkered with on that one. Use some of that auto tune or something like that to make it sound a little more polished. But overall, I like the tracks for the most part. It's just Yandhi as an album. He's been kind of mentioning it for so long. I was really hoping it was going to be deriving more of that soulfulness that he's been showing in the Good Sundays or the Sunday service.
Right.
A video leaked from this weekend Sunday service in Ohio, where he was rapping Jesus Walks, and the way he was just like in command of that room and just like the energy pulsing through it really made me hope like he was tapping into something from that like soulful old school Kanye type vibe, because it seems like when especially talking about Yandhi named after his mother, perhaps this was going to be something where he was going back to his roots a bit. But yeah, these tracks sound very very new school Kanye, very modern for him. So I was a little disappointed by that, but again, these tracks might not even end up on the album, and who knows when we're getting the album. We have no information around that. So
we just know he like took eliminated any release dates after Camp Flog Gnaw when he performed with Cudi, and he's like, it'll come out when it's ready. I apologize, all that. So it's not like it just came and went. He did officially acknowledge that, which I guess is nice. Thanks for that. But yeah, I mean, by the time a Yandhi or whatever the next album is called comes out, a lot of these songs will probably be quite old. So I would bet against really much of any of this coming out officially. And if any songs do come out, there certainly will be changed. I mean, you remember, from what we know, Ye was completely re-recorded after some public flack Kanye had taken. And that's something I would like to hear what that sounded like. Can we leak that? So yeah, I think listen to these songs on YouTube, check them out, try and understand, use it to gauge more of where Kanye was at when he was recording these more than anything else, because it's a cool look behind the curtain. But yeah, I don't think we're gonna get. And I love this cool album cover, which is a nice like Yeezus sequel. Yeah. Don't even know if that's real at all, but it's the one that's been ran with at this point. But clearly, none of this is any relation to Yeezus, production wise or thematically. So Yeah, I think whatever the next album is probably totally different because it'll just be more recently recorded.
Yeah, as we're wrapping up, I think I hope Kanye sticks to that where he'll release it when it's ready. Because even something like Yay, like you said, it was re-recorded pretty quickly. The cover, I think, was taken on the way to the listening party.
Yeah.
So it's just like I'd prefer the Kanye who is meticulous and he's tapping into that artistic creativity, but in a way where he's also like honing it, not just letting it go wherever it wants to go. Right. And that seems more like the contemporary Kanye at this point. So go ahead.
I wonder if Good Ass Job, if that exists, leak that. I want to hear that.
What we got for next week, Dave?
Yeah, so next week we'll talk about the Tool and Lana Del Rey records that came out recently. We'll also talk about The Deuce, third and final season premiere. IDK also dropping his debut album. Is he real? Excited for that? That guy can really rap. That's all the major stuff, and I'm sure there some other stuff will come up. But yeah, plenty to discuss. The movies are really going to pick up in September, so we'll have plenty of that soon enough.
The summer's almost over. Then we're on to the start of Oscar season. Can't wait for that. A lot of good TV coming too. So gonna be a lot. So stay tuned. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Go to soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod. Go to Twitter @nostalgiapod. And give us that 5-star rating review on iTunes. We'll catch you next week.